All right, we're going to go ahead and get started. Welcome again, once again, to the Statewide Technical Assistance webinar today for STRTP programs in California. My name is Richard Connect. I'm the Integrated Services Advisor to the Department of Social Services, and I'll be hosting your call today. We're here today in an ongoing series of technical assistance webinars. Today is the 5th in a series of what we hope will be eventually 10 or more. With the support of the CCR branch at the Department of Social Services, the California Alliance for Child and Family Services, and the Child and Family Policy Institute of California. A little over a year ago, an advisory group within the CCR developmental leadership team identified a mission to help support and ensure that all STRTP providers in California have access to and are effectively implementing the core organizational and leadership practices that will lead to the outcomes that CCR is intentional about. That is our mission. And the 10 organizational competencies you see reflected here, and today's call highlighted there in red at the top is number 1. So obviously we're not going in order, as this is the 5th. We have had prior webinars on agency provider partnership, intake assessment and referral processing, trauma-informed services, family engagement, and today is number 5 on agency mission, vision, and values. The 10 concepts and the organizational practices which support effective care in residentially based services come to us in California via our shared experience in implementation of the residentially based services and in the continuum of care reform principles, which of course are also system of care and wraparound based. We also consulted, as part of the development of this technical assistance, the national research on best practices in residential and congregate care for young people. So with that as a backdrop to our content today, we're very excited to have as our presenter today, Tammy Wilson, who's a licensed marriage and family therapist and is a longtime Chief Executive Officer at the Oak Grove Center. And Tammy's going to tell us a little bit about her organization's journey to effective care, implementing not only CCR principles, but a host of others. And if you'll bear with us just one moment while we pass the control of the slide deck to Tammy, we'll be rejoining here momentarily.
A pleasure to join you all today. And I am looking forward to sharing a little bit about our journey. There's on your screen is a little bit of the learning objectives, so I won't bore you by reading, but what we're really hoping to talk about is mission and vision as authentic drivers of healing, and then the value and power of key organizational documents. And of course, so many of us are in the process and or have recently become licensed as STRTPs. So our program statement, as Richard mentioned, that first organizational competency is going to be very important in terms of updating possibly or revamping your agency mission, vision, and values. So a little bit about Oak Grove. We've been at this process probably about 1.5 years in terms of STRTP. We do provide, in addition to our residential services and non-public school, wraparound services and independent living skills throughout Riverside County for foster youth. We're located in Murrieta. We were founded in 1989. I've been here since 91, and it's been really an honor to see the programs progress over time, and you know, kind of grow and evolve and get updated and add a lot of enrichment programs and an arts program, thriving culinary. We are Joint Commission accredited. And our big thing is that we want to empower success and transform lives. And I will talk a little bit more about that shortly. Although we have 3 locations, our primary main campus is in Murrieta, which of course is in Riverside County. And just the question for consideration as we set it up, let's take a look at how can and should STRTP and residential services providers use mission, vision, and values in authentic implementation of CCR and trauma-informed care. So I think of this as really a freshen up, because a lot of us had programs that have been around a while and we're proud of our programs, but chances are we really needed to do some updating as we effectively implement CCR and specifically trauma informed. So we need to be really clear in what that means. And providing a safe and stable environment is not enough. Maybe that was previously, but we really have to be more sophisticated now in terms of trauma informed care and supervision, the staff training, how we're going to support this new paradigm. And I think of it as an effective framework, but it's super important to have a common language. So as you implement it and really have that integrate through your whole program, you're going to have to teach that common language to staff. Our journey to high quality was a little bit related to understanding what CCR was, how we were going to apply it, how the philosophy was going to be implemented for us, and then really grappling with the importance of culture. And culture is hard to define because it's that quality that you can't just say this is our culture. A culture is more of a vibe that you get about the care, treatment, connections, quality of relationships, the level of resilience, to what extent you're strength-based. All of that is such an important part of the inner workings of the fabric of an organization and the types of relationships and really the level of success you're going to be able to create with the kids. So I think that there's some wonderful information that SAMHSA has put out, and we found that as well as other trainings useful as we started grappling with how are we going to implement this. So kind of did the basics with a mission statement. What is it? Why does it matter? One of the things we grappled with was how do we make that real and actionable every day? Mission statement is really a guiding principle. It's a reason for being. Some of us are in organizations that maybe your mission statement has evolved over time. We're on our second one. We definitely, I guess it was when I became CEO in 2005, we overhauled what had been the original mission statement. And now if I had to do it again, there are things I would probably even change. But a little bit more on that in a minute. Connecting mission to every team member's job is essential because we wanted to consciously make a decision that we don't want to just talk about this, but we really want to walk the talk, and to have it get integrated. It really had to get to the level that the staff are understanding what it is and how we're going to do it, what the mission is. Could they say it? It's a little bit clunky. So we had to do a lot of training around what it is and how does it manifest itself, and what does it mean to the type of relationships that we want to have with kids, and how will that relate to them. I don't know if any of you were on there was a webinar yesterday, and a shout out to the Traumatic Stress Institute. It was excellent, and they shared some of the best practices, including some from SAMHSA, but one of the points was made about one of the best practices is that people are hurt in relationships and people heal in relationships. And I really believe that. So we've tried to ground our trauma-informed care in the understanding that healing depends on healthy relationships. And with the type of children that we all treat, we know that we're dealing with some of the most disturbed, some of the most damaged kids, and yet it's so important to make connections with them. And they're challenging. So it may be that it takes extra special effort with some to create that safety, the trust, and the support for healing. But that really is what will make a difference. The mission of Oak Grove is to rebuild the lives of at-risk children and their families through educating, healing, restoring relationship, building character, and instilling hope. As I mentioned, I probably would shorten it knowing what I know now, because it's great, it's compelling, but it's a little bit hard to have everybody memorize. So we had to play around with some of what we were going to do so that staff could remember it. Ultimately, we ended up going with the tagline, and I'll tell you a little bit more about that in a minute, but empowering success, transforming lives. That's really what we want to do. And what we found is when we were able to agree on those 4 simple words, that really is our mission, if you think about it, because all that lengthier discussion is kind of encapsulated, and that's what we want to do. And we feel like it's strengths-based, and everybody can remember it, which is great. So 3 things your mission statement should answer is, what does your organization do? How do you do it? And why do you do it? And even now, in looking at that through the lens of this, why do we exist? There should be one sentence that covers that, and focuses on the end result. The what, and I'm going to go back a slide, but the what for us was really maybe the educating and healing, and the how is through relationships. And although it says rebuilding relationships, a lot of times you think of that maybe with the parents or support systems in a child's life, or the community, but it definitely will be the staff too. So in that case, it's maybe building the relationship. And another why would be so that we could instill hope and develop character. So that's just kind of a general framework. 3 things every organization needs to know by heart is what your purpose is, and that's kind of the reason. Why are you doing it? Why is it important? The vision would be what things look like if you succeed, and strategy is probably an ever-adapting plan for how to get there. So with us, our purpose was to rebuild the lives of at-risk children, as I mentioned, and vision was really about the restored relationships, having hope. And I think a strategy, there's 2 ways to look at strategy. That could be a short strategy and your big strategy. So the big strategy is really where the plan of operation and your program statement comes in. So specifically for today, the first of those 10 organization competencies. The short strategy may be just what you do to get your head around what it is that we do in a very short way that is easy to explain to people. So we ended up rewriting what our short slogan had been. Our short slogan had been, kids get better. We had a number of years ago done a lot of work with culture of accountability, and how were we going to be able to have every person, regardless of the department that they were in, talk about what they do here at Oak Grove and what our key result was. And at that point, we had adopted Kids Get Better. With CCR and with grappling with some of this a little bit more through a trauma lens, we really felt like, well, kids get better, but it sounds so passive. Do they get better just because developmentally they're older, or why did they get better? It wasn't a very active involvement with staff. So after a lot of debating and looking at how we could have something that more accurately captured how we feel like we've evolved, that evolved into empowering success, transforming lives. And by the way, with that, we find that everybody is really pretty good at explaining it. And when we would have some of these key in-services, some staff shared feedback that they felt like they were finally able to explain to a lay person or maybe a family member that wasn't sophisticated in mental health kind of a little bit more about what they did. The vision statement aspect is, I would like to think of it as covering motivation, direction, and action. So number 1, a vision statement should be future oriented and inspiring. It's like you're projecting into the future what your organization is going to look like. And the second thing is, are you doing things to make this vision a reality? That would be your direction. And 3, are you acting in a manner consistent with who you say you are and with what you want to achieve in the future? So think of a good vision statement as it should be a guiding image of success. It should definitely be inspiring. I like to share the example of Martin Luther King with his "I Have a Dream" speech. So he shares this, and it offers a vision that ended up changing a nation. And then in that same era, Kennedy would talk about, by the end of the decade, we'll put a man on the moon. So both of those are very compelling. A good vision statement should challenge and inspire. Sometimes there's a tendency to make the vision a little too internal, and maybe that comes from the business world, but we consider a good practice to have your vision statement be something that's motivating, that you can that you can share externally. Our vision is to be a premier treatment center that successfully prepares youth for healthy, productive, and responsible lives. And we literally debated, I can't even tell you how long, about those three words: healthy, productive, and responsible. And part of it is when you have a continuum of care, and there's so many, you have a non-public school, you have residential, there's all these different aspects. It's hard to come up with something that would fit them all. So healthy, that could be emotionally healthy as well as physically healthy. Productive, we achieved that because it would apply whether it was residential or non-public school. You want them later to go on to 2-year and 4-year or be employed in one way or another after graduation. We want them to be able to be productive, and responsible is kind of self-explanatory. So that's what it was for us, and it was important because long after they graduate Oak Grove, we want them to be successfully having productive, responsible lives, and achieving that success and sustaining it. So I'd like to look at, what does our leadership team do to make mission, vision, and values real for all? And we'll start with number one: how does it come alive? Honestly, this is where you have to do some training and some drilling down, and to really integrate it. I think there's a tendency to have a mission statement hang on the wall, or maybe it's on your stationery, but it's not going to come alive unless you really get it at all levels of the organization. So for us, besides training, it was integrating it with our job descriptions, putting it on the evaluations, as part of the evaluation and mentoring process, talking about how are you manifesting the mission statement? How are you rebuilding relationships or building relationships? Do you have trusting interactions? All of that, all of those sorts of values come into play with equipping the staff so that they can be the best they can be with the kids. We started awards. Besides the Employee of the Month program, we added Impact Award of the quarter. So we really want to look at who, recognizing an individual that is having an impact on kids. And by pointing out the good that's happening in others, I think it's inspirational for other staff. It's reinforcing for the person that is doing such a great job, but it also is helping teach others, follow, this individual is a good role model, and here's why. We also have value awards. So on company values, we have a value statement. A lot of that got updated with CCR, even though our mission statement didn't. So every value that's in there, there's one a month throughout the year, and we will honor a different value with a staff member and then say how they've demonstrated that value. So again, it's recognition, but you're also teaching others about the values as it goes. It's fun then in December at the end of the year to honor all the people that have had the values throughout the year, and that kind of makes a great group shot too. So 2, is there a gap between what supervisors say they do and what line staff actually do? There's always a gap. You talk about how we do fundraising for the gap so that we can narrow the gap between the income and then what we actually want to do for the kids. Well, there's always a gap with this, but the goal is to always narrow it as much as you can. And the more the supervisors stay on the line, I think we have some outstanding supervisors, but we don't want them off in offices. We want them still actively mentoring, very familiar with the kids, walking the floor, involved in crisis management. And as other staff see them, and as they also then see the staff that they're helping mentor, that really helps narrow the gap. Coaching, modeling, we use a supervision for success model, and we want to work on teaching how to identify the unhelpful patterns of interactions, and definitely having the staff become familiar with what triggers are with the kids and how to work with them to achieve success. Some of the strategies for making your mission come alive, I just think practical and fun approaches are a lot more engaging and will be retained better by staff. So we've done, different things. We've included our board with some of this. Some of the ideas that may seem a little hokey and kind of grade school, but people retain it, is if you're able to make a puzzle, do the mission statement on big butcher block, cut it into puzzle pieces, pass that out at different tables at the, at an in-service, see who can put it in the right order, the quickest, and just getting people interacting, in a playful way, kind of arguing about what goes first. So no, I thought that's a great way to retain it. Working on the best elevator speech, you may want to give an award for that. We've had people do kind of the funny version, who could, because if you think about an elevator speech, if you were going to describe your mission by the time you were, went up a couple of flights, you'd have to go pretty quick. So that's why that tagline can be really good to help you remember, even if you can't remember the whole thing word for word. Oh yeah, I remember those 4 words. We've done some role plays with them. All of that, I think, is a good way to get people engaged with what the mission is. And not to say it's words only. It needs to be what we're walking. So we grappled with, and I'd like to talk about, does your mission statement reflect current CCR philosophy? And as I mentioned, we were founded in '89, and CCR came along a long time after that. In our case, since it was the second go around with the mission, we felt like it was really okay. But if we hadn't overhauled it from the beginning, from the original one, it definitely would have had to have an overhaul. And even if you feel like your mission statement is okay, most likely your belief statement, philosophy, and some of the organizational goals and program goals, again, all part of Section A with the plan of operation, that's going to need a freshen up, because it would be hard to imagine, unless you're a really new program, that some of those core documents are as up to date and relevant as they could be with related to CCR philosophy and best practices. And honestly, since it's an ever evolving document, if I was writing it today, I feel like there's even things that we've learned over the last 6 months or so that if I was writing it now, I would probably even have a fresher twist on it. So I think it's really important to freshen that up and have it reflect current practice. One of the largest areas with CCR, of course, is understanding the impact of trauma, especially with the types of kids that we serve. And we know we're dealing with very tough kids, and the vast majority of the kids, even ones that are not DPSS and probation youth, have been affected by trauma. And it's looking like some of the later studies are showing that over 90% of our clients have come from trauma backgrounds. So really working in your program statement and then making that a reality to teach the skills that can be used to support kids who've been exposed to trauma and have attachment disruptions is really important. And then we want to work on identifying different types of trauma and symptoms and understanding how the brain is impacted by trauma. So I'm sure a lot of us are doing training in that area, but equipping the staff to understand about protective factors that can help trauma exposed kids recover, it's just hugely important. So as we do this, there's always obstacles, and I felt like there was a good resource. It's called How to Lead Change Management, and it's written from a business perspective, but in the article they talk about 3 obstacles to implementing a new approach. And I could really relate to this because CCR is a huge movement, but before that there's been times that you're looking at a topic of the month or the quarter, and so one of the obstacles could be change fatigue. Oh, here we go again. Is this really going to last? That's one. 2 is lacking the skills to implement a new approach. Sometimes something sounds great, but then the staff being able to grapple with what are the skills that I actually need to implement this appropriately. And the biggest obstacle is actually failure to address culture. So this article talks about how a success rate of new initiatives is 54%. I mean, think of it, only a little over half um, of the people are going to be able to maintain the success of a new initiative. And CCR is way too important to not have a higher success rate than that. So the article talks about how culture is more critical than strategy or model. And I also thought it was good because 76% of organizations that were unable to sustain change talked about how the executives failed to take into account the existing culture. So we know how important culture is. This is just a little plug for knowing how much you need to grapple with that. That's what we did. So very quickly, what isn't said can be more powerful than what is said. Culture is one of the most important steps in change management. We've talked about that. So how would you, and you can have your leadership teams talk about this, but try to grapple with how would an outsider describe your culture. People don't set out to have culture. It's hard to define. So if parents or youth, social workers, family teams, if they were describing your program, how, what kind of terms would they use? So there's different strategies for getting input about perceptions of others. We've used surveys, anonymous surveys, a 360 process. We had a grant that we were working on communications, and a company by the name of Hershey actually implemented surveys for us, and that was actually fascinating because they didn't share the sources, but they were able to do interviews. And I don't have time to go into it too much, but we were able to obtain input that didn't name the source and yet gave us very good feedback. Sometimes people really like your program, but maybe they're just not comfortable with, hey, you could do a little bit better in this area. And through this process, we became aware of definitely some of our strengths, but also some perceptions that we didn't know that necessarily others had. I think that's important. And at Oak Grove, we talk about a culture of accountability. We talk to the staff about the perception, asking, is this a perception we want others to have about our work, our team, our philosophy? That can tear down defensiveness. So when you're working on staff development, instead of saying, this is the way you're coming across, we try to get staff to be open to feedback and say, well, is that a perception I want others to have about me? Whether it's true or not, a perception is valid. So applying that to culture, we were able to learn a lot from that. Ways Oak Grove has used agency values to drive improvement: debate, discuss, discover, refine, repeat. I think what's really important here is not having a words only approach. And sometimes I think of that saying, we work with kids, so sometimes you have the thing, just because I think it doesn't make it so, with their distorted thoughts. And as it comes to applying trauma-informed care, just because you say, oh, we're trauma-informed, it doesn't make it so. You have to really integrate it. And when you're looking at your values, how are you going to defend? If you're saying this laundry list of our company values is what we're doing, I think it's good to say, well, what's the evidence of that? If we're talking about how important tolerance is, but in fact there's bullying going on, how are we going to deal with that? So how are you measuring the impact you're making in the values area is really important, and what you measure improves. So whether it's with kids or with staff, what you measure improves. What we felt like is the more that we put it in the job descriptions, but beyond that did coaching, role playing, working at engaging, all of that was really important. And I think sometimes the mistake is that we think that it can just be didactic. If we just say, okay, this is trauma-informed care and here's what y'all are all going to do, there's not going to be buy-in like there would be if you really get it at the level that people are interacting with it, and role playing, and then having a safe enough environment that you can make mistakes, and knowing that it's okay to say, well, I'm not sure I'm applying this in the right way, please give me feedback. So powerful and sustained change requires constant feedback. It's not enough to just do an in-service and think that you've arrived. And even with us having now done this the last several years, even with an in-service that doesn't seem like it is trauma related, a lot of times we will say, how can you look at this through a trauma-informed lens? So that's some of what I would recommend about getting it at a level that is going to be more integrated. So until you have a change in the overall culture, you're not going to be able to sustain the type of impact that we really need to do. Safe, stable, nurturing, all of that is like super, super important. So how our program statement lives for staff, training, mentoring, but it's the observing, modeling, practicing, asking for feedback, and refining that actually help the staff apply the trauma-informed approach the most. I really like the idea that you work with staff on teaching them to say what's happened to you, not what's wrong with you. Some of the kids can be, as you know, so demanding, so difficult, so hurtful, aggressive, like all of those things. We found that we can have greater empathy with how difficult their backgrounds are and what they're coming to us with, by looking at what's happened to them and not what's wrong with them. And just that little mind shift is very, very helpful. And then celebrating, well, how have you managed so well in spite of your adversity, and celebrating all that they're doing, that's working. So very quickly, the role of accreditation, hugely important. It's a roadmap to success. A lot of we're Joint Commission, but regardless of your accrediting body, that's going to support, those organizational goals, mission, vision, all that, and just kind of help keep you on track. The challenge, as we all know, is time and discipline, and just the tyranny of the urgent can be so consuming, but staying on top of those standards and where you need to be is obviously very important. The linkage between accreditation and quality management. Continuous quality improvement manifests itself in connection to training of staff. I won't go into this a lot, but again, what you measure is better. So what we do is we have what the key indicators are, a statistical baseline. If we're out of baseline, then that is a little bit of a wake-up call. Something is going on in this area, let's pay attention. That may mean an action plan. If something is sustained out of baseline, it could mean an action team actually coming down up with the process of creative strategies of how we're going to deal with getting a certain area, back in control limits. So just taking a look at what the data is telling us and how can we use that to be sure that we're making improvements. Your board of directors can be some of your best ambassadors. What we found here is that we want to really spotlight stories of success, and I'll bring in a resident every board meeting. So it could be highlighting the younger unit, the older unit, maybe the workability program. It will be different things. We're very big into arts and enrichment, so it could be sharing a performance. But what I found is if the board stays connected with the kids and the mission and the impact that you're making, they're gonna remember and retain that a lot better. And years later, they will share stories of a kid that they remember and something that touched their heart. So my recommendation is spotlight some of that. And I found our kids really consider it an honor to be invited. So they usually just really enjoy that. There's a little Q&A at the end, and I think they feel really proud of the fact that they were invited to a board meeting. So share the challenges with them, involve them in the process. All of that is very important. So I probably went way too fast, but I would like to open it up for questions.
Tammy, thanks very much. It's Richard. Really appreciate that thoughtful content. Let's see. I think you still have control of the slide deck. We're going to leave that with you. Why don't you back up one slide, though, just for fun for us. We
Sure.
do have one question in the queue, and for those who are dialed in, feel free to use the question feature in your little dashboard there and submit questions in writing. that's always the most efficient way for us to bring secondary follow-up dialogue to these learning conversations. Tammy, the question that's currently submitted has to do with your organizational culture content, and I'll preface the question by reflecting sometimes in a residentially based service, the roles that the professional team members have people can over-identify with those roles, so that clinicians sometimes see themselves as only being able to do certain things. Milieu staff, childcare staff see themselves as only responsible for certain things, and it's easy for an organization, particularly a large organization, to experience that kind of siloization or segregation of not just function and duty, but purpose. So the question that was thoughtfully posed by one of our attendees is, do you have additional suggestions to address the challenge of creating a new culture for an STRTP provider when you're bringing together mental health and residential staff to work together? How do you help bridge that gap, I think is the intent of the question.
It's a great question. I think honestly through a lot of dialogue, and so we'll do a program meeting that the various disciplines come to, and then just share what's working, what's not, where we feel like there's a gap between, where the milieu could be healthier. We'll talk about roles. Sometimes experiential things that you can do as a team where a child is able to see, it's not just unit staff, but the therapist is involved in this too. Team, you don't do that all the time, but those can be incredibly effective. We had prom yesterday, and it was so cool because you had all kinds of different disciplines. And I think the kids enjoy when they see the variety of roles at some shared event or assembly or performance, or things that we can do together. So some of my suggestions would be, there can be certain types of meetings that you do with the kids in general. There's dinners that we've done that we've invited people to. It's just them seeing that we're part of a team and that we work together, and that we talk, and that we are interested in supporting them, is a really good way to lessen the silo effect, I think.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, thanks for that. Did you say you had prom yesterday?
We did.
Was that prom like within your residences? You had a special prom for just your young people?
We did. It was really great because we used a board member's house, and this was has a beautiful estate, and so the kids went off grounds, and it was obviously the students that are at our residential treatment center and school, but some of our DPSS and probation kids go to public school, and we included them as well, and it was just really, really great. Saw them all dressed up and dolled up and on the bus to this.
Oh, yeah.
They had a
great.
Yeah.
That's fantastic. All right, let's give folks another moment or two to put forward any additional questions.
So I think while anybody's thinking of one, something that I had wanted to say that I forgot was that when you're grappling with culture and you're trying to implement a new paradigm, we know that trauma-informed care this is a movement. This is not going to go away. So the more we really embrace it, the better off I think we're all going to be. But it was a little bit of a challenge for us with our staff because we were doing so much training on it, and it can seem, these skills and techniques, and I'm not a clinician, how am I going to remember it, and all that. So just pointing out all the ways that they are already being trauma informed and sensitive and, strengths based, and, working to connect with kids, that helped them really see, I may not know how to label this or exactly what skill it is, but actually some of these skills I'm already doing. I think that was helpful. And for years, we had talked about concentrating on what's good and right and working, not bad and wrong and broken. And, then along comes you know, a different way of verbalizing and implementing, but the thought that, oh, well, that really was what that was. We just didn't know to call it that. So just lots and lots of talking, I think. And some of you will have great, amazing staff that are a little bit resistant. If you can help work with some of those strong personalities to actually maybe become your unofficial culture ambassadors, that helps. So one of the things we did was, instead of just having the clinicians present in services, really get your line level and supervisor staff leading panel discussions, Q&A, anonymous questions that the staff could, you know, put in, and then the panel would, you know, would respond, involve the clinicians with that too, so it's a shared approach. I had meant to add that because I think it's been really helpful.
Yeah, thanks, Tammy. Appreciate that. Your reflection about working with staff members that may be manifesting some reticence or resistance to kind of buy in reminds me of one of those kind of basic wraparound principles, that resistance is nothing more than the sign of an unmet need, right? So if we can recognize that our team members have needs as well, and if leaders meet those needs, then the resistance melts away, and the alignment between staff and between each other and leadership and staff is much easier attained. So thanks for that. Got some other questions here for you. Could you elaborate a little bit about how Oak Grove writes your behavioral plan? So maybe reflecting on your content and just dig in a little bit more, if you're able to, dig in a little bit to how these concepts might manifest themselves in behavioral plans for kids.
So, you know, the idea that you want them to be successful, sometimes you feel like you're with two languages, right? You want to operate out of your strengths-based voice and choice. How can we have success? What do we want to grow? But at the same time, you've got the old medical model, problem-oriented. What are we going to, you know, reduce, decrease, you know, lessen, etc. So I think you have to get creative, and the challenge is really making it individualized. And, you know, we used to say you could tell if it was individualized if you could take one, redact the name, and, you know, mix several up, pass it around, and have the staff be able to identify, oh, that's so and so, because it would be that individualized. Really, the cookie cutter, you know, thing that it looks like, you know, too many of them have the same identical goals and objectives. That's not cutting it. So you know, and I think child family teams and all that have given us even more opportunity to individualize and to involve kids in what they want to work on and how they want to be, you know, how they want to have ownership with some of that.
I love that thought. Not to get ahead of ourselves, but next month's STRTP webinar will be upon the integrated core practice model and its implications for providers in the community. And there is some really thoughtful guidance within the ICPM about service planning and delivery. And within that service planning conversation and the teaming that is required to do that effectively, we will we'll hit on some of those concepts of individualized planning, culturally competent planning, team-based planning, some of those things that I think will resonate in support of that question. So thanks for that. A couple more questions, I think. Could you elaborate? You talked a little bit about the importance of policy. Could we invite you to just reflect a little further on how your policies are regulated? So I think the question's seeking a little more kind of organizational behavior specific, like how do you create and monitor policy? How do you communicate it, train to it? Can you talk a little bit more about that?
Sometimes it's a great question. Sometimes, okay, so here's what you don't want. We have a huge, you know, like it looks like it's just, I don't know, it seems very voluminous, I'll say, policy manual. And the danger always is all this energy's gone into writing these things, but what if it's not really connecting? You know, how are you training and implementing so that what's in the policy manual is actually, you know, coming alive for the staff? And you know, part of that happens through the performance improvement process. And you know, we have monthly performance improvement, there's annual reports, there's all kinds of things that are measured. but sometimes it is really taking a policy that seems too onerous and like it's hard to really understand, okay, how are we going to apply this, and having training handouts on best practices and standard operating procedures. So a standard operating procedure, maybe even one on how you're going to handle unsafe self-destructive behavior, kids that need to be on special watch because of whatever issue. Sometimes that drilling down is a better way of kind of monitoring that everybody's actually implementing it appropriately versus, and I'm definitely not anti-policy, I just know that there's a tendency to have it be all this energy goes into writing them and who's really measuring that they're being applied and updated. I'd also recommend having a process that all of them are reviewed at least biannually, if not annually. And with CCR, we of course had to update some of those as well. So maybe even more frequently through this big transition.
Tammy, thanks for that. Very thoughtful. The question reminded me of my experience in agency leadership. One of the obstacles I found to be almost universal is that reviewing a lengthy policy manual all at the same time or in a short period of time can be just an overwhelming task for even a small team of people. There are literally hundreds of policies, right? So
yeah.
Saying we're going to take July and August to review all our policies is sometimes not very realistic. I have had some success with management teams where we just got in the habit, kind of the organizational discipline habit of every month we were going to review 2 policies, and you just start with the ones that are most important. And in the month of July we're going to review these 2, and then revise them and redistribute them and retrain to them, and then the next month we're going to choose 2 more, and just chipping away at it keeps them all fresh.
Right.
And it keeps the management team focused on the fact that policy does matter.
Yeah.
In terms of communicating. So
we do have a rotation schedule by department, and so they'll get notified the quarter ahead. All of yours are going to come up for review, and then any suggested changes, edits have to go through our management team. So we'll be talking about them that way. And some are just pretty basic and they get green lighted through, and some really have needed an overhaul. And especially when you come to some of the ones patients' rights, a lot of things on the unit, those definitely have needed that upgrades to reflect current practice. You can't just hang on to things that you had because that's the way we've always done it.
Thanks for that. And thank you to all the attendees who are hanging in with us. We've got some really thoughtful questions continuing to come in. Tammy, are you good on time?
I'm okay.
Okay, great. So the question around, this is, I think, a question Tammy will pass on, but just to acknowledge the asker or the submitter of the question, are there good articles to access regarding all of the STRTP challenges? I think what I'll do with you is follow up. I just need a little more information about kind of what you're looking for. There are probably some resources we can get you, and before we do that, we'd love to have a dialogue with you. So we've got your email, and we'll re-engage on that question. Let's see, 2 more questions I think we have time for. What are some of your key indicators that you measure? I think we're probably inquiring about measures of success overall in terms of clinical effectiveness. What are some of your key indicators? Thoughts about that, Tammy?
So, CAN scores, treatment plan progress, ability to maintain progress after they leave, all those kind of like success-oriented things, rejection in especially the safety issues, self-harm, AWOL, all the big ticket items, seeing a rejection and then ability to maintain safety, and then as they start taking passes and all that. So a lot of times it's, what are you reducing and then what are you increasing? So like as a seesaw, as some of the problem behaviors are coming down, what can you measure in terms of, what's going up, what additional activities that are being, added, some of the evidence-based groups will have the pre and post scores, which is always, helpful to see the difference, from, how they scored at the beginning of of a certain group and how they were at the end.
Mhm.
Every we have 3 dorms, so all of the dorms have indicators around the safety issues, and we'll do action teams related to an area that we want to improve, and then that will be a cross department where you'll get different disciplines working together. That's some of how you can work that.
Yeah. Thanks for that. Yeah, it's a fascinating question. So thank you for submitting. There was a time, I think, in our industry, our service industry, when we measured our success within a residential setting in terms of in terms of the young person's behaviors. For instance, how many of our young people are advancing to what level of our BMOD program, for instance, or what in our level system, how many kids are on gold level, for instance, or how many kids are attending school a certain percentage of days. Those indicators can be important. One of the things that CCR, I think, is trying to help us think about is what are our kind of long-term longitudinal outcomes for young people who do spend time in a residential setting. And really what we're looking for, I think systemically anyway, are indicators around how many young people leave an STRTP setting and then remain in a community home setting, home-like, whether it's foster home or bio home. Are they successful there, for 2 years after being with the STRTP, for instance, or how many kids go on to trade school or junior college, for instance?
Exactly.
I think we're starting to think, hopefully we're starting to think more kind of longitudinally about the impact of the STRTP stay, so that it's not just about the success within the program, but the success that translates to aftercare, if you will, to borrow a more medical term. So thanks for the question.
Some of the kids that you think aren't leaving on the highest level and haven't made the most progress, you follow them over time, and they did sustain maybe they didn't look like a superstar, but they developed connections, they worked on permanency, they have safe relationships, and they're bringing back their children years later, and talking about jobs and life and things, and stopping the cycle of abuse. So I wouldn't get it all tied in with the level system, that's for sure.
Yeah, love that. Okay, time for one more question. A little more, I think, a little more reflection on how to successfully influence or support the former group home staff in their transition to learning really what this new era STRTP care is. Mindful that organizations are trying to do that to kind of raise the bar for our professional performance, if you will, as an organization. You've done a fair amount of training, certainly at Oak Grove with your longtime staff. If you do have young people in your program who are working milieu, for instance, and still kind of stuck in an old school approach, if we can borrow that terminology, any other thoughts about how to support new learning?
I do. I think that's where a supervision for success paradigm can be really good, and so kind of like the gist could be, we really want you to be successful. In order to be successful, and then like lay it out, we're going to need to be strengths based, even with children that are very, very challenging to, etc. And then just looking at it through the lens of ability and willingness, right? So is it an issue of willingness, meaning they have the ability, they could choose to do it, and they're just not because the willingness is not there? It could be that they're not a good fit. So if after all this time you can't, if you can't adapt, right, then maybe there's another area of the program that's going to be better for you, but it's not going to be at that STRTP. I'm not trying to sound harsh, but some people have had to be reassigned, and some people, maybe they would be great as a one-to-one in the autism program, or I used to say nocturnals, but believe me, the nocturnals definitely have had to make the shift at this point. So So is it ability or is it willingness? When it's an issue of ability, then that's telling you, okay, we just need to work on giving you the skills. And if we work on giving you the skills, and then you have more tools and interventions, and are feeling comfortable with that, that's different than just the willingness issue. So I kind of like to separate it out, and that's where mentoring comes in, and being really careful that it's the right fit with the right dorm, and really working with your supervisors and your directors or coordinators to just be very, very direct and give authentic feedback. And I think there's a tendency to not want to hurt feelings, and not want to run. Some people we've had to just have frank conversations with. Are you able to move into this new era? Because that's what the kids need. That's what this is all about. And if it's not a good fit, we respect you and support you, but it's not going to be for you, and it's not going to be for them.
Yeah, I love that. Thanks. I'm reminded again of my leadership experience, and most of the time, if the organization is unhappy or dissatisfied with a particular team member's performance or role, chances are that individual team member is just as unhappy.
That's right.
And just as unsatisfied. And so having that really supportive, reflective, kind of trauma-guided conversation about, hey, this may not be working for you. Let's talk about a different role you can have, or whatever needs to take place. So those are hard conversations, but always necessary to make sure our teams are well positioned and well resourced. So thanks for that, Tammy.
Sometimes some of those like more strong-willed characters, if you will, that's where the training about the number one protective factor in overcoming adversity is the presence of a caring adult. And then just really, really driving it home. If you want to have impact, if you're going to be about empowering success and transforming lives, you have to be able to connect with kids. If you can't connect with kids, go find something else.
Yeah, I love that. Yeah, thanks. And that can always be done in a supportive, reflective way. There's no reason not to be human about that. So love that. Thank you for that.
Right.
So if we could invite all 80 plus attendees to join in a quiet moment of digital appreciation for Tammy's presentation today. Just so thrilled, Tammy, with your ability and willingness to talk to us today about your organization's experience. Thank you so much for that.
You're so welcome.
Please join us July 11th, a few weeks out, 2 p.m. The topic will be Integrated Core Practice Model Guide and its implications for providers. Nick Ryan and I will be co-presenting that day. So looking forward to partnering with Nick and the team at Hathaway Sycamores on their experience around core practice, and talking about how the state's core practice model can be influential and helpful to you in an STRTP or an FFA scenario. So look forward to that. Thanks again for joining us, and we'll talk to you soon.